the Forged and Unbroken podcast.
A little bit of an icebreaker as we get into it, though. I was talking to my wife last night, and I was like, there's this sixth sense we have where you do this job long enough and you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, vibes are high. We're going to run a fire tonight. Like you feel it in your bones, and I was trying to explain that to her. And I think she was going to try to put me on like an episode of the X-Files because she just couldn't get it. And last shift, sure as shit, like woke up, I'm like, I feel it. And then it was like 10 o'clock that night. I'm about to climb into bed and we get banged out. So I was trying to explain that to her. I was like, I don't even know where that comes from. Like, you've been in the service long enough now. Like, you've got to have that. Like, how would you even explain that? Right. I know you felt that.
Oh, yeah. Especially recently at work. I've had 3 first due fires in 3 tours. And that's a lot. I mean, anyone could lie and say, oh, that's the average, but like that was an understanding when my chauffeur said to me the other day, he goes, I'm going home, but you're going to go to a nice tenement fire today. I'm like, are we? He goes, yeah, I feel it. He went home. 30 minutes later, we had a nice tenement fire. Went through a 3rd alarm, right? So even the next tour, I say to the chauffeur, I go, I'm pretty hot. I'm just warning you guys, I am hot lately, and I feel it for today too. And they're like, yeah, right. During lunch, down the block, another fire, right? And they're like, you predicted that. I'm like, I'm just feeling it lately. I'm feeling it, but I know what you're saying. I don't know how you put that into words or into how do you express that feeling, but it's real. It really is. It's a real feeling.
It really is. There's something about that energy, man. I don't know if it's with other people. Sometimes I feel it like I'm waking up in the morning. I'm coming into the work. I'm like, I feel it. And then other times, like, you don't want to say it too loud because you don't want to jinx it. But then, like, kind of under mutter breath, you kind of like say it without saying it. Like, man, I feel it. And then I say 9 times out of 10, man, it happens. It's a wild thing. And to try to explain that to somebody who doesn't get it, they're like, you're crazy. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Intuition. I was about intuition,
Yeah, for sure. Now something I'd love to pound on you with is where you're at specifically, right? Like FDNY, known throughout the world. There's so many names now in the fire service that are almost like common house names when you talk about some of the expertise that comes out of the FDNY, and the service area is large and varied. I mean, all the boroughs have so much to offer. What I really wanted to lean in on, though, is where you're at. Not just the call area and not just the response area that you have to manage, but just the culture and the people. Because I think just within stations and first due areas, you have your special niches just with the personnel that you're dealing with, the community at large, but then also like your response area and the challenges that are presented. So I'd love for you to just kind of explain and get a little deeper, like not just FDNY, but where you're at.
It's a real poverty-stricken neighborhood, and there's tragedy, there's violence, there's depression. It's really raw. And working in a neighborhood like that, we really are their last defense or their last hope for a lot of these people. So, and it's kind of unique in East Harlem because we go into the Upper East Side a little bit, not too far. We'll go 2nd due down there, but the caliber of people there are very, very wealthy. And then, but our neighborhood, our response area, our first due area is the poorest in the city. So I see both elements of the response area, and now I'll take going to those projects as much as we don't want to go there, and as much as we live in those projects, I have no problem going and help people who really need help because we are their last line of defense, and it's an element of balance, and you can't fake it. Being a ghetto fireman is something that you can't impersonate. It's something that just becomes a part of you. It's ingrained in you, and it sharpens who you are as not only as a firefighter, but as an individual. So working in those neighborhoods, the poorest neighborhood in the city, it makes you a different kind of person. You see things differently, not only on the fire ground, but just in life.
Especially within the big cities, you have these socioeconomically depressed areas, and it adds a whole other layer and nuance to the profession, like how you got to deal with it. There's still, at least from my experience, there's still like a ton of gratitude that comes from the community, but there's definitely some arm's length stuff that's happening as well. And that can come into the operation side as well. like how readily available you're able to get into certain places, how open they are. Sometimes it's arms wide open, and other times it's like, there's a little bit of reservation. You're not necessarily from this community, and you certainly feel that at times. It's both a blessing and a curse, but I'm sure with Spanish Harlem, it's got its own vibe, right? What are some of those challenges that you see, like just tactics wise as well?
Tactics wise, the buildings are deteriorating around us. It is a really, really old neighborhood that has not been maintained at all over the years. So it is falling down around us we're walking in the buildings and the stairs are falling and people are living like this, And the projects that are city owned, we spend a lot of time in there and we become the city super almost. And we are their only help. And we go there for water leaks and stuck elevators. And it's nuisance runs to us, but it's a nuisance living for them. So when we do come into there, they are open arms most times, even in the most gang stricken areas and gang stricken buildings and courtyards. Like they open their arms to us when we do come in. Tactically, though, yes, the hydrants have been blocked with cars, and since post COVID, it has completely changed the game of firefighting. Because pre-COVID, they actually ticketed cars for parking on hydrants. Today, for whatever reason, post-COVID life, it's now a legal parking spot to park on a hydrant. So I can't wrap my brain around it, but that's the reality of it. So the engine companies are having a really tough time finding those hydrants. A good chauffeur knows where every hydrant is, but the problem is accessing that hydrant. As you see all the footage on YouTube or on social media with chauffeurs taking windows of cars. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. It is what it is, time and place. But we have to realize we're also very frustrated with the situation. So it's almost just a way to say, hey, listen, we need help to the PD. Like, come do your job, please. And it's not the NYPD. It's we have civilians that are meter maids to go around the city, and they're ticketing firemen outside of firehouses, but they're not ticketing cars on hydrants. So it doesn't make sense to me. But there are so many challenges in getting water on the fire. Yes, we always get that accomplished, but there's a level of stress now of accessing that hydrant that's very real.
Yeah, for sure. You just mentioned something that kind of got me thinking about this notion that I've kind of been pounding on a little bit lately with experience versus expertise. So you said a good chauffeur that's tenured. It's like these chauffeur emeritus, right? They've been there forever. They know the area. They know where these hydrants are. They know the problem areas where you got to get creative. And there's the training, there's the experience from the job, and sometimes we use seniority and experience interchangeably, and rightfully so. But I think sometimes when we get a little bit deeper, there's a difference between experience and the respect that somebody may want within their position, within their layer of the fire service. But that may also differ from expertise. And I'd love for you, I just love your opinion on that. Well, I got 20 years and I've got experience. Well, what have you done? How have you curated that over your entire profession? Whereas expertise would say, well, no, that's the skill. That's the tactical acumen. That is the strategic awareness and knowledge. How do you differentiate that? What's your opinion on that? Just, you kind of tipped me off with your, with the driver talk.
I think expertise is relative time and exposure. So there's a thing to having time on the job, right? 20 years is 20 years, but you always hear this, but it's so much truth to it. You can have 20 years, but did you experience 1 year 20 times? And that's experience. Relative time and exposure is important to understand relative time, though, because of that experience. If we don't grow and own those mistakes throughout those experiences, we never become an expert in, right? So expertise is about the depth and refinement of your experience. There's so much depth within that concept of understanding that your experience has to be processed, has to be studied and learned. And when you make those series of mistakes, and this is why I say humility really is the forward progression of the fire service, is because that experience without humility, you will never become an expert at anything. So It's about consistency. I think that's where you can dial in what expertise is being consistent at what your job is. And your job, even from the fire ground, from the fire task to being a senior guy, you have to be consistent. That's what we've lost, I think, a lot of times in the fire service is consistency. Runs are up, fires are down. That's what they'll tell you, right? And if you read any of the reports, I don't know how true that is, because I think, and I know for a fact in New York City, fire duty is up almost 40% than it's ever been in the previous years. So That's a good thing for us. Morale's high. We're going to fires. Guys are happy. But it's going back to that relative time and exposure. That experience, it has to be understood in real time. But it also comes down to understanding not only the fire behavior, but the building construction. That all comes to expertise side of things, which if you just live that 1 year 20 times, you're not diving into what that actually is and where you can take this job too. And there's so many levels where you can take this job, and it comes from loving it. You truly have to love it to understand it.
Yeah, I love that. that one line, humility is the forward progression of the fire service. That man, that hits hard. And I think we're going to get to it in a minute with some of like maybe the social media aspects of the fire service now and how that's really ballooned out, and I think it affects just what we do on a normal day-to-day basis. But I appreciate that sentiment. That is hard. With that experience and expertise, though, you being a truck boss, I have, from my experiences and some of the things that I try to put out there with just training, research, whatever, is like those high risk scenarios. It's easy to throw that word around, but I'm talking like the In-Extremis, near life or death. Truly, like, we need to lean into the fight right now or know when to pull back. From your experiences, whether you have stories and experience to draw from, or just your mindset personally, where you're at as a truck boss, what does it mean to you when we're managing these high risk environments, high risk scenarios, whether that's the environment itself or what other tertiary factors are coming out of it, like down firefighters, civilian rescues, whatever the case may be, right? There's multiple layers to it. What does that mean to you, just mindset wise?
I think it's important to understand that you can't let urgency turn into panic. Every move has to be controlled and deliberate. And having an understanding that we have no control of the situation. People try to control the situation in hand, but when you accept the fact that you have no control, you automatically gain complete control by letting go and stepping away from that situation and understanding that I am put into this situation here to fix the situation. I didn't create it. I have no control over it. So when you can step away and understand that the details separate survival from disaster. And again, this goes back to the humility. Again, we all type A personalities on the fireground, and we have to be able to survive, but we have to be able to make deliberate actions within that type A understanding. But we have to also understand when to step away and allow someone to step in. And that's a struggle on the fireground. It really is. And I've had fires where there's too many people telling you what to do, right? And this goes to the chief too. The chiefs in the command structure have to let their men work. You have to trust your officers, and your officers have to trust firefighters. It's all about trust and loyalty. Again, we're type A personalities, but having that humility to step away for the moment and say, okay, I do trust my guys, let them perform. And there's a time balance transfer in everything we do. Your time is ultimately ticking always, right? We have a tick, 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 constantly metronome in your brain of things that are happening on the fireground. And this is where that, going back to experience, you begin to learn what that time balance transfer is, because I always say time is a tool. And when you can balance and manipulate time to your benefit, you will win. But you have to understand that we have to have the same flow. That same tempo has to be throughout the fire. And every fire has a different tempo. But by allowing your people to work, you will get the job done. So when the chief is asking for a report, before the report's ready to be given, tell the chief, hold on, chief, let me get up there. I'm not up there yet. When I get up there, I will let you know. So it's about cohesiveness and stepping away and then coming together through a sense of humility to get the job done. And I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but I think that humility will keep you alive. Overconfidence is poison on the fireground.
Yeah. How do you split that out? Like, there's that constant push and pull of like that argument of competence versus arrogance, right? Like, you need to be able to trust yourself and your acumen within the profession. I like what you said. You can't control the environment, right? Something I picked up from Deep Survival is, nature doesn't adjust to your level of skill, right? So we always need to remain humble, pivot with the curveballs that we get thrown. We talk about, we got plan A, and oftentimes we just plan A harder, and that is that's not what we need to be doing. So how are you managing, or how do you differentiate that confidence versus arrogance but still employ whatever tactics are necessary and like lead your men and women into the fight. Like, I think, and I don't mean to throw this too sideways, like I would much rather have the company that I got to pull back on than I got to push forward. Right. Is that where you're at? Like, where are you doing? Where's this push and pull coming from? Where's that line between competence and arrogance?
I think it's respecting the danger, respecting that moment. People say there's no fear on the fire ground and that firefighters should not have fear. I think fear allows you to respect the danger. You said the word pivot, and that's exactly what it is, being able to adjust to a situation in real time. And going back to trusting your men, I'm so blessed with the guys that work with my company where I am constantly holding them back. I let them work, though. I let them take the door. I don't have to tell them. They're taking the door until I tell them to stop. They're pulling the ceiling until I say, okay, that's enough. So that push and pull, I think it goes back again to loyalty and trust and allowing your men to work. It should all be a cohesive form of understanding on the fire ground that when you get off that rig, and this is why I think that position firefighting is so incredibly important, that everyone has a position and a task. Our mission is all the same. It's saving lives. But we have a task to gain our position on the fire building. When that's cohesive and under the same tempo and the flow, that push and pull, I think, is natural. It's almost like a gravitational pull of the fire ground. And when we overmanage or micromanage it from the higher levels down, that's when we put the fire ground into a chaos. We put the chaos on. Screamers will allow chaos on the fire ground. And why do some scream? It's because we're trying to gain temporary control of something we cannot control. So we scream. Think about when you scream at your kids. And I try really hard not to. And I'm not a big screamer. I don't yell at my kids often on that. I discipline them. I don't yell at them. But sometimes you do yell because you're trying to gain control of the chaos. When a firefighter or a fire officer is on the fire ground screaming, he's trying to gain control of something that he can't, something that's bigger than you. Another thing we have to realize is that on the fire ground and in the firehouse and in the fire service, that this job is bigger than you. Yes, about the mission, but also the fire ground. It is so much bigger than you. It is not a one-person act. It is a team act. Even though in the truck we're operating remotely and we're operating individually, the cohesiveness and the company integrity is incredibly important. So I think when you put it all together, that push and pull is natural. If you have a company that's synced together, you have a fire ground that is synced, and you manage the chaos.
Yeah. Also being a parent that that hits, like, as soon as you start not raising your voice, but once you get to that point of yelling, like, you realize that you've lost control. Temperatures are raised at that point. And it's just a downward spiral, right? Like you need that reset almost from the, I call it like the bell curve. The Navy SEALs and MARSOC, they're the tip of the spear in the military circle, so to speak. Now I know you're in New York. I'm the Orioles. We're going to have some difference of opinion about like top tier stuff, but the Yankees have got the resume to say, like, World Series champs, right? Even within elite circles, though, you have the people that are going to be on the bench more, right? And so I use these analogies just to say, as command officers and even line officers, we need to know who our go-to people are. We need to know who the go-to companies are. And sometimes it ruffles feathers, but that may mean that we need to bypass certain companies, or we need to bypass, or, hey, we need to pull up certain people because, hey, you're going to excel in this situation. Maybe even operations, maybe even order and policy says we need to do this, but we need to be able to deviate from that because we need a better outcome, because the bell curve of the people that I have in front of me needs to change a little bit. I guess number one, do you even agree with that? And two, how are you managing that on the fire ground, whether it's you going up to the chief or you going down to your own people or other companies on the interior?
I do agree with that. And I think it's important to have a level of fire ground respect, especially as a company officer, but it goes both ways. Respect in the sense when you realize you get to a certain point of a fire and you can't do anymore, your men have had it. Like and you've hit that wall. There is someone who's going to go beyond that. So you have that humility once again to allow that moment to happen. But flip the script. there's an understanding as well as letting your men work, and that comes from the inside as well. If you are a company that's assigned to double check someone's work or to make sure the job is getting done, allow them to get the job done. Do not overstep if, in fact, they are doing the job. And that's where we come into problems on the fire ground, is because we are type A. It is never personal. It's professional. So act as a professional in the fire building. And that's a problem when we introduce personalities with type A, with high stress situations, with everybody knows it has the answer. So managing that is very hard as a company officer. Again, letting your men work, but also I think that comes from when you are drilling and training with your men. Yes, we train how to force the door, but we also have to talk about the mission beyond the door. That's 10, 15 feet inside the door. But then we also have to talk about the art form behind that and the personality and respect that comes with it. I can't even put it to words, but there's such a noble thing about being that firefighter on the inside of a fire building. And we have to respect that ability to be there, because we're not there as much as we want to be. No one is going to as much fires as they would like to be. So when we're there, we really have to cherish that moment, but own that moment. It's kind of like, especially on the floor above, I feel like on the floor above, it's almost like a magical place, because it is such a dangerous place to be, and things are happening in real time, but time almost slows down for me on the floor above. And I love bringing firefighters to the floor above at a good fire for their first time, because afterwards it's like a spiritual feeling, and we talk about that feeling. We talk about the respect of the fire building and how important it is to get water on the fire and how important it is to listen to the radio when things are starting to go wrong. Details matter. And when we focus on the details and we accept the details, I think that as a community within the department, or a community in a battalion, or on the fire ground, we have to just respect one another. And I think that is the success in the fire ground, but it's also the success of having that working relationship with other companies.
I've had the fortunate opportunity to listen to you speak a couple times now, when we were in training days together down in Greensboro, a couple other spots. And just got on the topic of training, you have really put out some amazing information when it comes out to the lithium ion fires and the truck company tactics. And you can it in such an approachable way. And there are a couple things I know for me that has changed mindset. I know we're trying to get a little bit more forward momentum just where I'm at, just coming from some of your lessons here. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Like, there are definitely a lot of aspects that of the fire service that have maintained. They have they're there for the longevity, but I think you're seeing some new focus, or you have a different spin on some of the emerging needs for the fire service. So with lithium ion fires, talking about like one of the things that stuck with me was how quickly these things are popping off. And typically when the scooters and the bikes are in these hallways, people don't have a chance to escape. So now we're managing, one, the impetus of the fire, the lithium ion issue, but then now we're also having to couple that with, there's a greater need for rescue and more aggressive forward facing tactics to get people out of these bad situations. And you're seeing that firsthand where you're at. So we're talking about some of these emerging needs. I'll kind of let you go on this. Like, we can define it as like, what's your top few that you're really pounding on right now? Or what are some of these like overarching global messages that you're trying to put out there in a lot of your teachings? Because I've certainly benefited from it.
I think we have to get back to the basics. And I don't like saying back to the basics as like we lost them, but we have to refine them. We're so quick to look at steps 10, 11, and 12 through our training, thinking that we've mastered 1, 2, and 3. But for many of us, and what I'm seeing now is that we're not even close to mastering 1, 2, and 3. There's a mastery form of the fireground that has to be set. There's a standard set. The problem is every place you go, the standard's a bit different. As long as we have a good foundation with stretching lines, forcing doors, understanding the art form behind all of that, then we can forward progress and get things done. However, we have to have that foundation. What also I'm seeing within the basics is that when we're being put to the test, we have to be ready to perform at all costs. So we can drill, and that day never comes. And I know it's hard when you practice football 5 days a week and then Sunday comes and there's no game. So over time, you're going to say, I'm not playing football anymore. still getting a paycheck, so you're going to the stadium, but you're not practicing because game day is not coming. When you know the game's not coming, why would you practice? But eventually in our business, they don't care where you're from. Game day is coming, and you have to be prepared. I am seeing complacency on the fireground. I'm seeing complacency leading up to the fireground through our trainings. How do we fix this? I don't know if there is a fix. I don't know if it starts at the foundational level in the fire academy. What I'm seeing now in the fire academy is lack of discipline, and I think lack of discipline is trickling into the firehouse. I'm not saying that's a New York City problem. I think that's probably a fire service problem. Discipline is almost non-existent for the most part in any firehouse. So when we lose fear, because the outside's pushing in to the inside of the firehouse, behind those big red doors, civilians have now got a grasp of what we're doing. And I say civilians, the civilian employees. And they don't like what we're doing because we like what we do. They don't like what they do. They don't want us to be happy, I don't think. But you can't take the firehouse and make it a corporate job. There's no way it will not work. We are wired differently. We are different types of people. We do different jobs. That said, with them coming in and almost poking and prodding and pulling it back to the onion a bit in the inside of that firehouse, we're losing the senior man role and we're losing fear. Once you lose fear in a firehouse, you will lose the firehouse. So that comes back to the foundational basics of the fireground, because when we're losing fear in the firehouse, people are cutting corners, people are taking the easy way out, and next thing you know, we're at a fire, and then the details are being overlooked. So if we can focus on the foundational understanding of the fireground through details, the devil's in the details. I always say that everything we do comes from seeing the bigger picture, but within that picture. Everyone says, oh, think outside the box. Sometimes thinking outside the box is simply looking inside the box. And that's where we can fix the fireground and fix the future of the fire services by look inside the box, fix the details, create the standards if we don't have them. If you have them, maintain the standards. That all trickles over to the fireground.
Yeah, I dig that. The losing fear aspect, like it's almost like a lack of respect for some of the fires and the high risk scenarios we're finding ourselves in. Like it's a muscle that's atrophying. At least I'll also just speak to my area. Sometimes we realize that, hey, maybe we're not going to fires as frequently. You know, we go through our spurts, we have some good runs, then we have our dry spells. And it's like, hey, I've had people tell me, like, me personally, I've never forced a door, so why do I need to keep up on this skill? We got somebody else that'll do it. I haven't needed it. The doors are always open, or it's cheaper construction. And it's like we take advantage of certain things not happening. So yeah, I like the way you can now with that losing fear. The discipline, I'm going to pin you a little bit more. Could you go a little deeper on that? Like, what does that look like on a daily level to you? Like, you're coming in, how are you organizing your day with your people to develop that discipline? I know you talked about like some of the strategies and training and some of the cultural things, but like, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis to you? Like, how are you leading and organizing that day for your men in your company to maintain that discipline that we so desperately need?
So every fire department has their own culture. I think the FDNY is a bit different, where most great firehouses, even the good firehouses, and some of the average firehouses, the men run the firehouse. They come up with a day-to-day schedule, right? The officer does not get involved. Now, we go out that door to a fire, well, now the officer gets involved. And organizing that throughout the day is as I'm going about the day, we're going to get the meal, we're doing this, we're doing a couple local errands for the guys. I look at every building as we're driving around the neighborhood like it's on fire. So that gives me an opportunity to get out of the rig and talk with my guys and say, hey, take a look at this, or take a look at that building, look at the fire escape. Imagine the fire was in this window. So you can have a way of looking at a building that the building is always on fire. And I always say to the young firemen in the Proby school that you have to start looking like the buildings are on fire. And they look at me like I'm crazy and they laugh. I'm like, no, seriously, when you get done with this academy, every building you go into, if you're out with your family having dinner, if you're getting coffee, you're walking into a bar, you should be looking at that building like it's on fire. Because visualization is a real thing, right? We talk about this all the time, and visualizing what you're going to do. So just to circle back to your question, as far as navigating my day with that discipline, is that I take every opportunity to train my men, even when they realize they're not being trained. That's the way I run my company when I'm there, because the captain ultimately runs the company in my job. Lieutenants are the officer for that day. more or less, if that makes sense. So when I'm there, every lieutenant, every captain has their own style. My style is love and loyalty, but ultimately the fire floor is number one. The floor above is number one. The rest of it's bullshit. That's the bottom line. There's no administrative emergencies. It's about the men, the fire floor, and the floors above. That's it. So when we can have that understanding, I think we all come to an agreement. But I'm very fortunate to where I work because the firehouse runs itself flawlessly, and the men are so good with their daily step by step. Like they have every day laid out. And I think it is important also, like there's a relationship that comes from an officer and the senior man, and an officer and a chauffeur. Like usually the chauffeur is the senior man or one of the senior men. That's a very important relationship to have and maintain. If you don't have the relationship, I highly suggest that you fix it, because the chauffeur is the ambassador of the fireground, and the senior man is the ambassador of the firehouse. You have to have him as your ally. You cannot have any disconnect with them as an officer. So that's very important that we're on the same page with the senior man, your chauffeur, and then your officer. When that all comes together, I think the discipline becomes natural.
Yeah, nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. I've certainly felt that when there's that disconnect, man, the culture crumbles, and then that will present itself on the fireground. Something you just tipped me off on with the love and loyalty is I really push for men, especially, but all humans, to kind of define their own core values. And it's like your own rubric. It's your own code to develop and nurture and cultivate how you want life and your profession to look. And I think you have these businesses that'll have like 20 core values out on a poster, and I think that's too much. In my opinion, personally, it's bullshit. 3, 5, 7 maybe tops, to really hone in on, and like, what are the things, if I were to really distill them down, matter to me, and that's how I'm going to influence my personal life, my responsibilities, and my home life, my hobbies, and my profession. I think you just kind of cued in on them with the love and loyalty. Like, what is that for you? And is it the same for both work and personal life? Like, is that how you're leading forward with love and loyalty? And it's like, I love it. It's great. Is there anything else to that?
You got me on that one.
I went deep quick.
No, yeah. No, as far as the firehouse, love and loyalty in leadership, I think that when you can read all these Navy SEAL leader books, you can buy any bout of catalogs on how to become a leader, right? Go to any conference in the nation and there's going to be a class on leadership. But what we're missing is that real leadership just comes from having a humility about yourself and being humble, admitting when you're wrong, loving your men and women who work for you and under you and above you, and respecting them. That's love and loyalty. That's real leadership. Because if you show that you're not this higher power, I'm the boss around here, I'm the leader, and you show a level of equalness, your men are going to follow you. There's no doubt about it. And so that's true leadership to me, is when you just are genuine, you have humility, you love them, and you're very loyal to them. I think that works inside and outside the firehouse, personal life and professional life. I think that's how we should be looking at life. Is it easier said than done? Many times, yes. But I think that's a pretty core value of anything. And when you master it, which I don't think we ever truly do master love and loyalty, I think it's always a growing thing within us. I think it's alive. And does it die? Yes, it can die, but you can always bring it back.
Yeah. And I love the way you ended that. It's like it's a journey. It's always ongoing. And something else you said, it is, people can see through the bullshit, right? Like, if you're disingenuous, I say it's performative. Like, if those people that read those leadership books like you're talking about, and they're instituting the policies, and maybe they're trying to work through it, and it's like that awkward stage, but people know if it's real or not. And when you just read something in a book and like, oh, that's cool, I like that, and then you employ it, but it's just to get a certain end state, that's being disingenuous. And I feel like your people can really read through that. Like, you got to be yourself. It's got to be real. It's got to feel real to you, or else you're just lying, not only to yourself, but to your people. And they can see through that. I mean, I feel like that's where that loss of respect is going to come.
Yeah, and I think also is we have to be able to be normal in the firehouse. You know, you have to be a normal guy. And when you read these leadership books and you go to the conferences and you write down all these things, this is how I'm going to command my men, right? You lose the normalcy of what it means just to be a human being. And but that said, when the tones go off and you turn the corner, it's out a couple windows, there has to be a level of professionalism like no other. There cannot be any room for doubt. It has to be 100% trust. We build that trust by love and loyalty.
Spinning off of this with just personality, love, loyalty, these core values, something that since I've been following you for a little while now is this element of, I'll go as far as saying art that you bring into this profession. You know, like you have your style and I love it. Like and I've learned so much from you with the strategy and the tactics and the expertise and the research that's coming out there. But then you're also vibing with music and there's creative writing involved and there is cultural aspects that you're posting about FDNY or wherever you're traveling to. Firefighting is art, for lack of better words. Like there's this movement about you, the writing, whether it be through other forms of media, like you're doing it different. And I so sincerely appreciate that. Where's that coming from? And how are you coupling these two together? Because I wish more people did it, to be quite honest. Like we get so hard up on just throwing out fire department talk, and you're bringing all these external elements to you and what you do. And it's quite honestly, it's refreshing. Like what does that mean to you? Where's that coming from?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I think it's just being authentic. Everyone, especially with social media today, it's everyone's trying to be that next platform of success of firefighting. But if you're just yourself and you're authentic, it should come natural. I don't know if that answers it, but it's just being me. Like I grew up skateboarding, it's in a band, like love basketball, love hip hop, I love city culture, you know? So it's like, that's just who I am, but I also love firefighting. Like firefighting is my entire world. So it's like incorporating it all together, it just becomes I guess a personality, but the art of it is translating chaos and silence into reality, I guess. Preserving culture maybe, but I think that everything, when you look at the X's and O's of life, right? And when I see X's and O's of life, the strategy of life, that's the tactical side of the fireground. But then all the good things at a basketball game, right? The crowd, you know, the cheerleaders, right? You know, the popcorn, all that stuff. That's the love of the game. But when you really, really love the game, you know the history. You know the history of the neighborhood you work in. You know the fires that came long before you and who was working those days, and you listen to the stories told. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it comes down to the love of the game. The game is firefighting, but all the good things that come with it. And when you truly do love it and you are in love with it, it should be coming natural to you. Anyone that's listening and that's thinking about becoming a fire instructor, a teacher of the fire service, an influencer, if that's the word you want to use, just do you. Don't try to duplicate anyone else. And there's so much noise on social media. And, you know, it got bad about a year ago. I think there was like a platform every day popping up and then they go away. But I think success from any of this comes from authenticity and being honest, but also being consistent. Consistency is everything. And when you are consistent, maybe your true colors will shine through consistency. But in the end, if you just stop and smell the roses and take it all in, it's all good stuff, man. And you just love it. You just have to love, I guess I don't necessarily want to say I love life, but like love all the aspects of life and then put it together into everything that you love into one.
Yeah. No, I absolutely appreciate that. I think we get so focused on these singular aspects within our work and life that we forget to step back and be like, why do I love this? And that's where that element of, like you said, the history comes in. It's the essence that sometimes it's hard to define. It's all these extraneous factors that make up the entire the game, the art, whatever. And it's obvious that you lean into that. I just wish more people did that. I think it's really easy to focus on the negative. And I feel like when you focus on the positive and that's your gut reaction and that's your priority, it's really hard to let the negative noise come into play. I do want to pound on just for a second though, like where are we going wrong with this? Whether it's like firefighting as art or the social media presence, like I think there's this aspect of either we're eating our own or there's like this one upping that's involved. I feel like we can do so much good for ourselves and each other and the service if that's not as loud. Yeah, sure, there are issues. There are things that we need to overcome and do better with. But I feel like the way some of the messages are being canned, it's doing more destruction than good.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles to that. And I think we're confusing a lot of content with what this craft really is. I think we're generating content for self-exposure. It's funny when you see someone take a break from social media, they'll make an announcement. I'm stepping away. Well, if you were really in this for yourself, then you're stepping away. You're letting everyone know. But if you're really doing it for the betterment of the future of the fire service, nobody cares that you stepped away. Just take a step back, reevaluate your life, and step back in when you're ready. You don't have to make an announcement. It's something that just drives me crazy. And I spoke about that with Jeremy quite a bit. We have these conversations behind the microphone, off the microphone a lot of times, and that's a hot topic for us both right now. It's just people who really, really believe that this job is about them. And that's where we're going wrong, is that we're not instilling into the young firefighters coming on the job that this job is so much bigger than you. The fire ground is bigger than you. But the job itself, this calling to become a fireman, and is it a calling for some? Yes. Do people just fall into this job as well? Yes. But you have to understand the magnitude of what this job is. Like, it is not about you. None of this is about you. And when you go into the training aspect of the world and with social media, what we're losing here is that we're judging people. And we have to realize as a culture and a society, which is a lot easier said than done, is don't give a fuck what people think of you. Don't. That said, I have a board of directors who I care very much of what they think of me. But there are only a few individuals that I respect very, very much. So when I do something out of line or out of step for me and my personality through my platform, I get a phone call right away because they're watching everything I do. It's sometimes it's seconds when I post something. And tactically, if it's wrong, they're watching out for me. They give me a heads up. Hey, bro, that's not written right, or that's wrong, or that's good. You know, it's culturally, if they see me out of step, they give me a nudge. Bro, that's not your style, man. Reholster that, you know? So what we're losing is that we're allowing, because firemen, no one hates another fireman worse than another fireman. And I think that comes down to a lot of jealousy, because not everyone has the balls to put themselves out there. And I'm not saying I have big balls that I did this. I'm not, every day I wake up and I go, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing still. And I've had top fire tactics going for 8 years now. So I'm like, and there's some days I wake up, I'm like, I really wish I never started any of this. But it's, what we're losing is that we're eating our own, like you said. And that's really where we're losing, I feel, is that guys have so much information to share. So many incredible firemen. And usually the best ones out there are the ones that don't say a word. Yeah. So at least start small. And if you are angry with the culture of the fire service and where we're going, and always talking about how it used to be when things were better, and don't leave and retire with that information, share the information. So start on a company level. Make sure the guys know the history, the tradition, and then the experiences and the mistakes that you've made. Then pass it on, because when you go, they're going to go with you. Take it to the next level. Maybe instruct on a county level or a city level. Spend some time at the academy. Pass on to the next generation. I always get a kick out of guys that are not accepting to the new firefighters coming into the firehouse because it's not how it used to be. And these guys don't get it. And there is a lack of discipline. And this guy doesn't even know how to start the saw, you know, all these things. And so maybe you should go out to the academy and show these young firefighters what this job is about. It's important we do that. And I know it's hard to leave the firehouse, but I don't think anyone has really the room to bitch in the arena unless they're the ones making the moves, for the success. And then take it to the next step, right? Ones that are teetering on, quote unquote, the circuit, which I hate that word. But it is about passing on the tradition and culture of the fire service, passing on the tactics. But this comes from humility, and that's what we're losing, is that no one has humility anymore. Like I said, humility is the forward progression of today's fire service, but it starts with allowing the fact that don't worry so much what everyone thinks of you, because the ones that are judging are not the ones that are doing.
That slaps. I feel that. There's a couple things you just hit me off with. The first one being the new generation coming in. And I know myself, my buddy Brian, and Sam Hiddle out in Wichita, we've talked about this a little bit. It's the new generation. And it's interesting. I was that one day, and now I'm just over 20 years in, and I'm starting to see the differences from where I'm at and was to the people coming in nowadays. Our next class starts tomorrow, so that'll be all types of cultural headbutting, so to speak, that'll be we're going to figure out together. But the one thing that my buddy Brian mentioned was that he's like, hey, listen, I love this generation coming up because, maybe they're not as mechanically inclined, or there's more social media presence than there is the blue collar, mechanical inclination. But one thing's for sure is that if you help them understand the why, they want to know the why, but the buy-in and the ownership, I think, is more powerful now than ever. Because as soon as you have them understand that why, bam, they're bought in, and they'll go to the ends of the earth for you. And I certainly feel that. And I think maybe that's probably, I know that's not the culture I was brought up in originally, where you had to seek out the guy who would help explain the why. How does that feel for you? Would you agree with that, with this culture coming in?
Yeah. And I do like the question, and I do like the why, but we have to pass on to this generation coming in that the why is sometimes you just have to figure out the why and watch and learn. And they want a systematic steps of the job. They want to walk in the firehouse and have a piece of paper that explains everything they're doing, their duties, and like what that cultural is. But this is why, not to go off track here, but people are packaging culture and trying to sell it to you.
Yeah.
Classes at conferences, the articles written, culture. You cannot, I don't care what anyone tells you, you can't teach culture. Culture is learned from the men that came along before you, and it's passed down. And every firehouse, not just every job, but every firehouse, every company within that firehouse has its own culture. So I'm not quite sure how people are selling books on culture when culture is very personal. It's very unique.
That's powerful.
Culture. Good culture, bad culture. But culture is personal. Just like firefighting is local. Culture is personal. So when these firefighters want that list of, okay, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, these are my rules and guidelines of being a probationary firefighter. A lot of that there's value in explaining why we do things. This is why we sweep before we mop. Basic things that not everyone understands in the firehouse. This is how we boil an egg. Like we start with the basics with some of these probies coming in, right? But what I'm getting at is that sometimes there's steps, systematic steps of success. And sometimes it's just learning from your mistakes and figuring out the hard way, because things aren't written down, because you can't write them down, because there's no set rules. It's just something that you learn from doing.
Yeah, man, nailed it. I really appreciate the differentiation there too of it being local. That's such a good analogy. It is so specific and almost like at an intimate level. So when you have these guys out there that are putting out the books on it, like, yeah, sure, there's some global messaging there. I never thought of it that way. I love that. It in a similar vein, this is something that Mike Nasty and I from Tip of the Sphere were pounding on offline a little while ago. Was it's really common right now for, we'll say, like the firefighter rank to really push back on leadership, company officers on up, where they see issues. And I do believe that we harness and hold a lot of responsibility on the job for our people. At a certain point, though, I'd love your opinion on this, is how do we hold the firefighter rank also accountable? Because yes, we are responsible at our rank. What I'll say is, like, well, the firefighter rank also needs to be coachable. You need to bring certain elements into your personality in your day that lends yourself, that gives you credibility to be somebody, like you said, in the culture that follows our personal cultural norms and brings the rising tide up. Like, and I think it's really easy for people to just hem and haw on leadership, but it has to happen at all ranks, right? You being a company officer, busy house, major department, like what's your thoughts on that? Like how do you, I don't want to say push back. I don't want to be overly negative with this, but like, I do believe we also need to have some element of your firefighters being coachable. It's like that coach athlete relationship, so to speak.
Well, I think leadership comes from within. It doesn't matter a rank. So when you have an understanding of a culture that leadership does come from within the individual and within the company, that should make things create a standard. Standards are the problem, because when the standards begin to slip, that's when we lose the firehouse. That's where we're losing that fear element, right? So that's where the firefighter rank is pushing back against the officer rank, probably in many places. And I don't see that in my job. That's not an issue I have for the most part on our job. I know it is a cultural issue in other places, but I think that comes from our standards are set pretty strict. And with that standard, there's a level of respect that I always gave because I was raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
But being on the other side of it now, I didn't realize that it was a coachable standard of our job, that boss rank, that from the firefighter to lieutenant rank, is a huge cultural shift, but there's also a huge level of respect. Regardless if you respect the individual, you respect the rank. So that is a problem. How to correct that? I think, again, it comes once we lost that fear element, it's kind of they're just not falling in line. And when the small standards slip from the fireground to the firehouse is where we start losing the men. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think how we reel that back in is introducing a level of standard that we can't allow to slip anymore. And if your standards have slipped, bring them back, create new standards, but your men have to rise to that standard. That's the bottom line. I set the standard on the fireground. The senior man sets a standard in the firehouse. And that's why that relationship between senior man and officer is so incredibly important. Now, when I say I set the standard on the fireground, that standard was set long before me. That's the FD&Y standard. That's not my standard, but I'm the one who is enforcing that standard. And if you don't rise to my standard, then you find someplace else to work. That's pretty obvious the way we do things in where I work. But firehouse as well. We have to be able to say to firefighters that are pushing back against that rank, that senior man has to be that middleman. And there is rank and file. That's another thing that we've lost. And I think why we have this problem is that there's no systematic rank and file. There's no pecking order from probie to senior guy. Everyone thinks they're equal. That comes from lack of respect. And I think that's a generational problem. And I think it's a cultural problem. How do we fix that? Again, that comes back to parenting, really, is how do you raise your children to respect your elders? And I'm saying others. I'm not talking someone that has 30 years on you as far as age. I'm talking someone that might have 4 years of you in the firehouse. He's an elder to you in the sense of what that cultural infrastructure is.
Yeah, 100%. There's that line, there's that saying, this is the standard is the standard. And that's it. Like, we either uphold it or we don't. And any deviation from that is lackluster. And unfortunately, I'm with you. Like, I don't really feel that presence within my department and the culture there. It's it seemingly be like one of these messages that's, again, getting put out there on social media that, things are bad and it's all because of leadership, the formal leadership. But like what you said, it's like, it's not that it's necessarily intuitive or innate, but how are we being raised up? What positions are we respecting? Whether that's just the guy who graduated 2 classes ahead of you, right? They have things to teach. And again, it goes back to the respect and love and loyalty that you've been pounding on this whole time, man. But no, I appreciate that. It's interesting. So I know we're pretty much right at an hour. We were hemming and hawing pretty quick. And I want to be respectful of your time. You have your fingerprints all over the fire service, and I've been following for a while. Like I said, I appreciate everything that you're doing when it comes to the elements of the strategy and tactics and what you're doing with Jeremy, and then also the classes that you're putting out. If people are interested in doing, like, having you come out and talk, or whether it's your pages, like, how are people finding you, and what are the classes that you're pounding on?
My one class is Fire Academy to the Fire Floor. Why the disconnect? This is more or less, it's developed over time, and that was a class that was my first class that I put together a few years back, and I just kind of bridges the gap from that lost probie trying to find his way to the senior guy, giving a rebirth back to the job, and hopefully taking on that role and building in those and maintaining those standards. That class kind of, it builds that process, and it starts from day one and works throughout fires consecutively throughout your career, because everyone's experience is a little different, right? My experience is different than yours, and so forth and so on. So you can sit in that class and remember your first day in the firehouse, and you remember your first fire, and you remember your 6th, 7th, 10th fire, and as you progressively went throughout your career. So you can kind of follow along more or less, and it makes sense to everyone. But the main takeaway from that class is humility, because Tim Collette had a great quote, and it says, every fire defines who they are. And when he said that quote, I loved it, but my mind went to a fire that defined who I was not. And I break that fire down through humility, through the mistakes I made that ultimately where it was almost a fatal fire for myself. And so it was a huge learning experience for me that changed my whole direction of my career and my life, which pretty much brought me to speaking and teaching. And this class was a product of that fire, of that environment, and then the years leading after that. So once I could compile those feelings years later, I developed that class. So that's my bread and butter. Lithium-ion battery fires, understanding a modern fire in a tactical sense. This is not a hazmat class. This is a 100% tactical class. We talk about how these batteries are failing very rapidly. Now, it's not necessarily changing how we fight fires, but we have to look at these fires a little bit differently tactically, understanding the byproducts of what these batteries are off-gassing, how dangerous it is, the importance of wearing your face piece, even during overhaul now. So that's a class, and that class is being developed every day. I'll go to fire tonight and I'll go to work tonight and have a battery fire, and then I'll think about it, I'll reflect on it, and then add that to the class, because as we know, the fire service we're very reactive, and we're trying to be proactive with this, but unfortunately we can only be reactive as we're learning in real time. So this class is ultimately being developed every day when I go to work, and then I go home, I study, I put it together, and then bring it to you if that's the class you're looking for. But it is always in real time. There's never anything that I talk about fires that lead us there, but it's almost a timeline to where we are to that moment. I've been out in the car updating the PowerPoint 4 minutes before the class begins because something's going on somewhere, Then I have another class called Truck Intellect, which is really just the X's and O's of firefighting. It talks about positioning, the importance of understanding where you fit in, how that'll make you a great firefighter, not necessarily doing your tasks of throwing ladders or forcing doors. They're the task, but ultimately the missions inside the fire building. We break that down into a more detailed understanding of truck work. And you can get any of this by emailing me at top4tactics@gmail.com, or if you do DM me on Instagram, unfortunately, I will get it most times, but sometimes it goes to a spam folder, which I never see. It gets, I don't know where, sometimes I don't even get them. So, and if I do open it and I close it, it gets buried very quickly. So know that if you are hearing this and you DM me about anything, I never got back to you, I apologize. Do it again, because it probably got buried somewhere in the mix.
It was funny when we were in Greensboro together a couple of years, like I was just kind of starting on my journey with being asked to speak a little bit more on some of my experiences and whatnot. And I was just sitting down there with, it was Doug and Wells, and we were at dinner, and I think we were all sitting down at a small corner table. I'm like, I freaking know this guy, and I don't know where, and I don't know how. And you were sitting right across from me, and we just pounding on all kinds of stuff going on, like, oh, how's the family, how's this and that. And the next day we were sitting next to each other. I think you had spilled coffee. I was about to grab you another shirt, and you were getting ready to go on. I was just funny. It's been interesting to see how this thing has evolved. And sometimes I don't know what I don't know, and it was just awesome to break bread with you. The night before. You're incredibly approachable, and I've picked up a ton from your stuff. The passion that you put into your projects is infectious, and it's obvious. Yeah, from what little bit we've gotten to hang out, I think authenticity is a really great word to kind of sum it up. So you are who you are, and like I said, I so appreciate and respect what you were doing to the craft and to the profession. and you're as real as they come when we were able to, just sit there and break bread and have a good time. So like, I so appreciate you taking the time, some dude down in Maryland for an hour before you head off into the job. And yeah, man, I thank you for your time.
No, absolutely. Of course. Thank you for the kind words though. That's very nice of you. It means a lot. And I feel the same way. And Training Days is probably, if not the best conference that's out there. So props to Training Days. If you have any ability to go to that over the years, please do, because that was my pinnacle of speaking, was Training Days. Looking back, like once I feel like once I got to that level, and as you can test, probably was looking into that crowd, or like before you went on, I was like, wow, I cannot believe I'm here. Like this is a hand selected group of giants that have gone before me for many years, and I'm still very, very grateful to have the opportunity to do that and meet you and see everyone at that conference. So again, if you are in any of the areas for Training Days, be sure to check that out. They do the right thing. The only word I can give for that is they're just a classy conference. Like it's 100% class, and it's run so well. So it just going back to the kind words, and then you said authenticity, but like Robin Williams, right? You ever see Dead Poets Society?
Yeah.
He has a quote in the end, and he says, "We're not laying pipe, we're talking poetry." And I translate that to the fireground and to the fire service is that, everyone says, oh, it's blue collar, we're blue collar workers. Yes, we're blue collar workers, but there's such an art form, and it's a profession. Firefighters came long, long before us. All the guys that I looked up to, all the guys that romanticized this job for me, like 3/4 boots, long coats, leather helmets, right? That's my board of directors today. They were all firemen in the late 70s into the 80s. They're the ones, right? So they worked really, really, really hard to make this a profession. So don't ever dismiss this as just another blue collar job, because I think that we are professionals at the highest level. We are tactical athletes at the highest level, but we're brothers. It's the best job in the world. And if you are struggling, if anyone's struggling with their position in their career right now, just know ruts are real. Everyone gets a rut. Everyone goes through a rut. Just ride it out. This job is like the ocean. Tide goes in, tide goes out. Tide goes in, tide goes out. Just ride the wave, because if the tide's out, you're going to go to work, have a good fire, something's going to happen, tide's going to come back in, and you're going to be riding that wave on the high of what the greatest job in the world is.
Man, I love that. It's that surfer mentality. Another wave's going to come. Ride it while you got it, and another one's going to come. You crushed the ending. I wanted to set you up with one last thing before we go, if you got the second. Usually when I'm pounding with some of my friends, we're sitting there saying, one of the questions I'll commonly ask is, hey, if you had an opportunity to sit down and speak with one person who's no longer with us, who would it be? And one that I commonly go to, I have a handful, but one is Robin Williams, being born in the 80s. So you tip me off with Robin Williams. Just that, man, his passion for what he did, and just obviously being born in the 80s, he has fingerprints all over art and media. Who would that be for you?
Without question, would be my grandfather. I'm a third generation fireman, and he died when I was in high school, my senior year, I think, or just right outside high school. But he was a fireman when firemen were firemen, and he never really spoke much about the job, and he was just grandpa, But I can't imagine the stories we could sit down and tell together now, because he was the first of us, right? And then my father came, and then I came as a firefighter into the fire service. But I want to know what made him become a firefighter, and the love he had for it. He was a very stern officer. He was a captain. He was very stern. I know that the guys say he was a very strict officer, but they respected him. He's seen things that I can never imagine seeing on the fireground. So that would be my guy, was to sit down, have a beer, and just talk shop with him about firefighting. Because everything else I've talked to him about over the years is great, but we never sat down and talked what it was like to crawl down a hallway.
Man, that's awesome. I love it. That's a great answer, man.